Beaming to you from the plastic microphone studios deep in the heart of Cajun country, I want to welcome you to Fave 5 from Fans. I'm your ever enthusiastic host, Jamie Ray, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for another exciting episode, the podcast that is all about favorites. And we have got a really great show. It'll be a joyful show, and we're ready to dive right in and talk about our favorite picks. Today, I've invited Hannah Herron, Professor Hannah Herron, to zoom in and discuss our Fave 5 Stephen King adaptations. Now, this is the first time we've ever done this. We haven't gotten together and tried this, and I had a really bad thing and it went horrible and it was all that never happened. So if somebody says it did, they're lying to you. This is the first time we've ever talked. She is the author of several short stories, a novella, and multiple novels. I mean, she's done more than so much than I ever have done. And anyway, her new novel, Awake, is an Oklahoma bestseller. Oklahoma, you say? Is there a connection to a certain J Hall? We're going to find out. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Hi, thank you, Jamie. Thanks for having me for the
For the
very
first time.
first time ever.
That's it. Very first time ever. So I am super excited and very, very humbled that you could take a little while to do this. I know that this was a very hard list. I want you to take a minute and tell people who you are, and then later on in the show, we're going to get into all your socials and where people can buy every copy of every book you've ever written. So go.
All right, so
Thank you. So this is the end of the show.
yeah, well, we'll wrap it up there. That's it. So that's me, and yeah, so I am an author, like you said. I write mostly horror, thriller, mystery novels. I'm also a professor. I teach professional writing, shocking, at the University of Oklahoma, which I love very much. And I am also a co-host of a portion of the Okie Bookcast with Jay Hall, who I believe some of you may be familiar with. He is my dad.
I think he's
He
been
and
on the
I
show once or twice.
I think he's been on a few times. Yeah, I think you guys might have met maybe a time or two.
This one.
But he's great. I love podcasting, and so super happy to be here tonight.
I am super happy for you to be here for the first time ever. All right, well, we're going to get more into the podcast that you guys do later on. It's so much fun. I've listened to several of them, and it's back from hiatus. So right now, you'll be able to go and listen to them and just revel in how great she is. But instead of that right now, I am so ready to talk about our topic. So our topic is Stephen King adaptations. And like you said, you love horror. So this is right up your alley, right?
Right up my alley. Absolutely.
Did you find it hard to make this list?
I found it near impossible to narrow my favorites down to 5, and I didn't quite. I've got some honorable mentions, but
Not 12 like your dad.
not 12. I didn't cheat quite that bad. I've the apple didn't fall far from the tree, but it fell a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm able to narrow things down.
Nature versus nurture,
Yeah, it's hard to say. So
Well,
I've got a little my mom mixed in too, and she's pretty decisive. So
he begged and begged me to get you on the show. I mean, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this for you. But, one time, oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. It was me begging him to get you on when I found out that you were a horror author and that you loved horror stuff. Because I love your dad, but he doesn't like the scary stuff.
right, I know it's kind of boring like that.
Yeah, and I'm boring in so many other ways, but we're not going to talk about that. What we are going to talk about is our honorable mentions. So if you've never listened to the show or seen the show before, an honorable mention is something that you just couldn't get in that 5 list because it was so hard. So you still wanted an opportunity to talk about it. Or it was something that is so memorable, aka bad, aka unforgettable, that you wanted to talk about it there, because we don't bash on stuff here because favorites are favorites. So I think if you're ready, you have less than 12, but more than one honorable mention.
That is correct.
Let's go for it.
All right. So I had my list of my top 5 and
Ah,
I was good to go with it. But
that's a
then
quarter. That's a
but
quarter.
but then I remembered one other movie and it was neck and neck between this one and that one. And so this one got bumped to honorable mention, but I just have the one.
All
So
right,
I
just the
feel
one.
pretty good about that. Yeah, I feel pretty
Wow.
good about
It's much better than me.
that. So this is a film that was adapted in 2004, starring Johnny Depp, who I love his acting. This is not one of the more well-known Stephen King stories because it's a little bit different from his typical stuff. This was adapted from his collection of stories in Four Before Midnight, and it is Secret Window. I
Oh,
absolutely love
yeah.
this story.
Re-
Have you read it? Have you seen it?
I've read it, like, because I've read everything up till, I don't know, the early 2000s. I don't think I saw that. I'll be honest with you. I never made that connection that that was a Stephen King adaptation. Wow. Okay, sell me on it.
Okay, so I think a lot of people are in that same boat. I think a lot of people have either seen the movie or they've read he calls it a short story. It's more of a novella, but I'm not going to tell Stephen King what to do. So, story goes like this. Johnny Depp plays a struggling author who's going through this really nasty divorce. And so he is kind of secluded in this remote cabin in the woods where he's trying to get the creative juices flowing again, trying to recover from this split and get back to writing, get back to what he loves. He gets a knock on the door one day, and it's this farmer from somewhere nearby, but not too close because he's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And this farmer is accusing him of plagiarism, accusing him of stealing his story.
Okay.
And the Johnny Depp character is completely baffled by this. He's never stolen anything. And this farmer keeps coming back and keeps tormenting him. He is sneaking into his house, he's doing weird things. And so you're following this kind of like slow descent into madness of this
Right.
character as the farmer is kind of making things crumble around him in this remote location. It is very sinister. It has creepy vibes, but it's not scary. Like I wouldn't
Okay.
necessarily classify it as true horror, maybe psychological horror at best. But the way that you are so locked in on just this one character in this really remote location the whole time, trying to figure out what's going on, it's got great mystery to it, is
Uh-huh.
so engaging. And so it had to make the list because it's such a different kind of story from what Stephen King usually tells. And yet it really worked for me. And
Wow.
I enjoyed the adaptation.
Well, that's got to go on my list then, because I never watched it.
Yeah,
That's
you've got
that's
to see it.
awesome. Johnny
It's so
Depp.
good.
I
Right.
think I always confused that movie with Jim Carrey's Number 17 or something like that, because they all the covers kind of look alike, but I know I've
Yes.
never
Yeah, yeah,
seen
yeah.
that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great pick. Starting out strong.
Well, thank you.
I like that. And that's your only one.
That is my only honorable mention. I kept it slim this time.
You are bringing honor back to the Hall family.
I'm saving you all that time that my dad spent telling you about his honorable mention.
Uh, well, I have two because, again, it was so tough. The first one is a movie I've talked about before, but I don't know if I've ever told you the story, since this is the very first time we've ever done this.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
it is 2007's the movie The Mist. Okay, so if you're familiar with the story, it actually comes out, and there's different people will tell you different things. It was a 3D immersive audiobook first that came on cassette tape, and it told the story of, after a storm in Maine, this mist, fog, starts to descend on this small town, and there's a lot of things going on. It some people think it's the end of the world, some people think it's the rapture. All of these different things are going, and this father, his son, and their next door neighbor are just trying to get through it. So they took that, and Frank Darabont just was able to expand it into it. Now, you've seen this?
I have seen this. Yes.
Okay. So the story goes, when I went to see it and I got to the very end of the film, I threw a hissy fit. And I was like, oh, I can't believe you gave it an ending, and they do. And so for years, I was like, I don't want anything to do with that movie. I don't want anything to do with it. But as I got older and started to kind of understand what he did, I now I really can appreciate it. And I really do. I love it. I never watched the series, but I've heard it's good. But for me, honorable mention's got to be The Mist because I hated it and now I love it.
I think a lot of people were in that same boat. I actually watched the movie before I read the novella, which I know that's a sin. I know that's not how we do things, but um it was just one of the I happened to flip on the TV one day and the movie was on and ended up, wildly fascinated with it. And so I didn't realize what a drastic difference they had made with the ending until I actually finished the book.
Yes.
And then, kind of went back and forth on which I liked better. I think you're right. I think there was a tactic to giving it a more concrete ending for the movie. Um, but it's tricky too when you've got these two different options of how you want it to end. Do you like the ambiguity or do you want something a little more concrete to such a kind of bleak story, right? It's
Yeah.
it's hard to
Yeah.
have a happy ending in that situation either way. So I think a lot of people would agree with you on
Yeah.
the ending of that film.
And for me, the killer is that those two characters that lock eyes as they're moving on the road, and you're
Yeah.
like, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to ruin it. So,
Yeah.
okay. So then I have another honorable mention that's actually two parts. Okay. I'm spending too much time with your dad. It is from 1982's Creep Show, which is directed by George Romero. So the one that I can't really count is Father's Day. Now, have you seen this movie?
I have not seen this one.
Okay. So Father's Day is an original story written by Stephen King for this movie. Okay. And it kind of tells the story about a family with, like, the old matriarch of the family is he's rich and all of his kids are just horrible, horrible people. And it's Father's Day and they get together and that's it's just it's horrific. Okay. But I can't count that one because it's not truly an adaptation because it was written for. That's how I feel in my head. So instead, I chose The Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill, which is an adaptation of his short story Weeds. Okay, you familiar with Weeds?
I've read Weeds. I have
Okay,
not seen the adaptation.
so Stephen King himself plays Geordie. So it is, I mean, he does little cameos here and there, but this whole thing, it's, I don't know, it's maybe 20 minutes or so. He does a really great job. And, the whole creep show thing gives you the side angles and it kind of looks like a comic book and stuff. And there are just so many lines from that movie that just live rent free in my head. So, because it was so small, I just I had to put it as an honorable mention, but I love what he did with it, so it's there on the list.
I love it. I love when he appears in his adaptations. And
Yeah.
I haven't seen any where he like really truly got to act for an extended period of time. So I'd be
Right.
interested to see how he does with that.
Yeah, and he yucks it up. I'll tell you, he really plays the character up, and it's definitely watch it, and it'll make you consider licking your finger before you turn in pages for the rest of your life.
All right. I'll have to give that a watch.
All right. Well, let's bounce back. Now we're into the real thick of it, and you give me your number 5 most
All
favorite Steve
right.
adaptation.
So, number 5 is going to film that originally came out in 1990, starring one of my favorites, Kathy Bates and James Caan, and that is Misery.
Wow, that's a great choice.
It is it's such a good movie, truly. So the story of Misery is we have a writer. Once again, this is a theme with Stephen King, right? All these writer characters, but this particular writer is an alcoholic. He's struggling with addiction, and oh, I love it. one one night he has a little bit too much to drink. He gets in his vehicle. He ends up crashing in a snowstorm and is knocked unconscious by this accident. He is abducted by a woman who claims to be his biggest fan. Now,
He was cared. He was rescued and cared for.
yeah, that's what she thinks. And that's what she convinces him at first, but things take an ugly turn, as they do often with Stephen King stories. And she is actually truly a big fan of his novels. He writes this series that centers around this character named Misery, hence the name of the story being Misery. But he had decided to kill off Misery, the main character in this series, in the last book that he wrote because he was kind of over it. Like he wanted to write something different. But this woman, being his quote unquote biggest fan, she didn't so much love the fact that he killed off her
Yep.
favorite character. And so she locks him in a room in his injured state and says, "You will write a new ending. You will rewrite Misery. You will bring her back and you will keep the story going, or else." And she definitely has her mechanisms for getting him to do so. I'll just put it that way.
Don't want the else.
You don't want the else when it comes to her. This movie is absolutely fantastic. And with this story, it's another interesting one where the setting is pretty limited.
Yeah.
Majority of it takes place in just this one room where she's keeping him.
Right.
And they are almost exclusively the only two characters in the story as well. We have like a police officer at one point, kind of, but for the most part, it's just the two of them. So a lot of the story, once again, takes place in the main character's head. And then we have, the action sequences with her as well. It is absolutely phenomenal. The acting is perfect. It's a very faithful adaptation. Some of the dialogue is even like word for word what
Right.
Stephen King wrote in his novel, which I love when they do that and when it's portrayed well. Right.
Yes.
So I just loved everything about this movie.
That is a wonderful. You are so brilliant. I just have to say, you're just amazing because that's my number 5 as well.
Great minds think alike.
Yes, I've done a whole thing about Misery. My friend Scout, this was her grandmother who was like your dad, doesn't like horror, doesn't want that was her favorite movie. And so she every time she'd go over to her grandmother's, they'd pull it out, they'd watch it. When it got to this scene that everybody knows about, she'd
Oh yeah.
cover her eyes. The grandma, not Scout. But it is, I mean, there's you could just talk about this movie ad nauseum. It tripled its budget. Directed by Rob Reiner, which I found a little thing out. Did you know? You remember when the helicopter is flying around looking for him? Uh,
Uh-huh.
Rob Reiner's the pilot.
Oh, how
Yeah,
fun.
it's a little cameo.
I
And
love that.
I do agree with you that 95% of the movie takes place in that room, in that bed, and they're the only two. But you really have to give shout out because the policeman, the sheriff Buster, Richard Farnsworth, incredible job.
Mhm.
Virginia, Frances Sternhagen, and then his agent Marcia is Lauren Bacall. I mean, if you're going to get some bit actors to
Yeah,
play these little roles, he's doing pretty doggone well, you know?
right.
So I guess when Rob Reiner and Stephen King call you, you're like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it."
Yeah, you go ahead and sign off on that
Yep,
one.
that's right. That's right. And it won Kathy Bates the Best Actress Award,
That's right.
the 63rd back in 1991. So yes, all around amazing movie, excellent choice. You have superb taste and
Yeah.
superior superior intellect. So,
Excellent taste on your part as well.
oh, that's true. I guess I would too. Huh? Didn't think about that. So we can bounce right back and go to your number 4 now.
All right. So my number 4, there are actually several adaptations of this particular book, but I am going to talk specifically about the 2019 film starring Jason Clarke, and that is Pet Sematary.
Oh, okay. Okay. The
I
reboot.
the remake of the first adaptation, if you
Right.
will, which is also absolutely fabulous.
Yes.
I I like some of the creative liberties that they took with the 2019 adaptation. It's ever so slightly different than both the first film and also a little bit different from the book as well. But the story of Pet Cemetery, for those who are unfamiliar, this is about a family that moves to this farmhouse on a big piece of land. Once again, a little bit more secluded, remote area, but they do have a neighbor across the street that they befriend. But this land has this very mysterious burial ground on it. And as it turns out, anything that is buried in these grounds will come back to life, but not exactly the way it was in
Not the
life.
same. Right.
Um, so, as you can imagine, things get a little creepy and a little interesting with this particular plot of land and what may or may not end up buried in it and what may or may not end up coming back out of it. Um, Pet Cemetery is just one of my favorite Stephen King novels in general, and so any kind of adaptation that's done with it, I'm going to watch it. Even they put out one like a year or two ago that was not great, like the Bloodlines, I think it
Oh
was.
yeah, didn't watch it.
I yeah, don't yeah.
But the one with the little kids and stuff.
Yes, the marketing for it was really good and I was really excited, and it doesn't quite hold a candlestick to the first two adaptations, and it's kind of a spin-off too, so it wasn't a big deal that it wasn't my favorite, but 2019 version is definitely my favorite adaptation of this book. I think it's one of his scariest stories, and maybe that's why I
Really?
like it
Oh,
so much.
story. Yes, I agree. I agree.
Um, it and the film was just really well done. Once again, we've got really good actors. We have Jason Clarke,
Was he
and
a Terminator or John Carter? I mean, John. Anyway, I'm sorry, John Carter. I think he was in the Terminator reboot, or
maybe, yeah, I'm not
got
sure.
that very severe look to him.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Um, John Lithgow plays the neighbor across the street, Judd
Yeah.
Crandall. He's great. Very creepy moments. I think maybe why I prefer it over the version from, was it the 70s? Is that when the first one came
It
out?
was the late '80s.
The late 80s. Okay. Um, the cinematography in the 2019 one is really good, and some of the CGI is a little bit obviously more advanced than it was in the 80s. So it feels a little bit more in your face with some of those scary moments, but I think almost all the adaptations of this book have been fantastic.
Mhm. Well, that's a great choice. Um, though I will have to disagree with you
Okay.
because my number 4 is the 1989 version of Pet
Amazing.
Cemetery. Everything you just said is 100% correct. They did have a lot more available to them as far as cinematography went, as far as CGI and doing those things. But 1989, I saw Pet Cemetery in the theater. I It was a movie I could never consider being remade if for nothing else for Fred Gwynne's performance as
Yeah.
Judd Crandall. Okay. That was for me just one of the most amazing performances in any of these movies that he turned in. The little kid was great, Gage. And of course, I had a huge crush on Denise Crosby. So, all these things were working. Um, Now, correct me if I'm wrong. In the first Pet Cemetery, the boy, Gage, gets killed.
Yes.
Okay. And in the second one, it's the girl. And
Right.
isn't it the girl in the book that gets killed?
That's a great question. I don't remember. So I do know that it's the younger child in the book. It's the younger child that is killed, but I don't remember if that's the boy or the girl in the book.
Okay. Well, I'm
Because
sure
in
somebody.
that adaptation, it's the girl, but she's also the older sibling.
Right,
So
right.
that's kind of different either way. I know it's the younger of the siblings, but I
Okay.
don't remember if it's a
Well,
boy or a
Stephen
girl.
King's a huge fan of the show. He's a member of the podcast universe. So I'm sure
Right.
when he
He'll
sees this,
email in.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, for
I
sure.
could text the no, no, it's okay. Let's just finish what we're doing.
We'll talk
Um,
to him later.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I will, I again, the story that both of these movies come from is just amazing to the depths that a parent will go to for their child. And sure, you can say that Dr. Creed was doing it the first time he did it to the cat. There was, it was making his life easier. So there's not really, you can't really get behind him because it's like, man up and explain that the cat's dead and this. But anytime you bring a cat back, either here or in Reanimator, it doesn't turn out well. Okay. But then when the child dies, either in either movie, then you feel a whole different thing for him.
Yeah.
Now you're like, oh my God, he knows what this will mean. And yet he still does it because he loves his child so much. And for me, that's one of the most scary parts of it, is because what would you do to have that child back even though you know what it's going to mean?
Yeah.
So, bravo, bravo. That is a we're gonna, I'm really interested in what your number three is right now, because maybe it's a remake of my number three. I
I
don't know.
know. Yeah, are we gonna go 3 for 3 here?
All right, well, let's find out. Rip that band-aid off and tell me your third favorite Stephen King adaptation.
All right. So my third favorite adaptation is one of the reasons why I am skeptical of hotels, because this is an adaptation of The Shining. And
Okay, we're
it
clear. We're clear.
yeah. Okay. So my number three is The Shining. This came out in 1980. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall. I mean, just absolutely wonderful actors as
We just
per
lost,
usual.
you
Oh
know.
yes, yeah.
That's-
Um, so The Shining is about a family that takes care of this hotel in Colorado in its off season, and so it's nice and snowy, completely secluded. If you haven't seen a theme yet with Stephen King stories, there's always a little bit of seclusion. He likes to isolate his characters. The thing about this hotel is it is extremely haunted.
Capital
And
H.
so just like the most haunted. And it's interesting because he based the novel of The Shining off of a real hotel, the
Mhm.
Stanley Hotel, which is also in Colorado, and is apparently haunted.
Yeah.
So, I love those little kind of connections that he makes to the real world sometimes. But The Shining is one of my favorite Stephen King books. Once again, it is the kind of story that could be harder to adapt into film because so much of the book is just taking place in the main character's head and is kind of his skewed perception of reality as he kind of falls further and further into madness, the more that the actual shining is kind of taking him over, and the hauntings become more and more lucid for him. And yet the film did such an incredible job of adapting exactly what was happening. It is ever so slightly different. The ending is definitely a little bit different from the book. I don't know that I have a preference of which ending I like more. I think they both worked for the different kinds of stories that they were trying to tell, and just the kind of ever so slight differences that they took within that. But I think that this adaptation is absolutely wonderful.
I have to agree. And, again, Shelley Duvall just passed maybe less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They had a memorial set up at the Stanley Hotel. And there was pictures of her and stuff that people were driving all the way out there just to leave her flowers or leave, different things. And it is a very, very intense book. and a very intense movie. Like you said, they do a great job of like he's walking down the hall and then wait, did I just see a bear? Or and then walking down later and I'm gonna go take a bath. Well, okay. And of course the bartender, the whole time. So I could definitely see why this would make your list. Another great pick. And amazing carpet.
Yes, absolutely.
So did you get to watch or read the follow-up that came out a few years ago?
Yes to both. Eventually, I was a little bit late to the game on the film. I like the book, and I think I liked the film. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like exactly what I had envisioned
Sure.
from reading the book, and that is on me and not on them because obviously like my expectations of, what I was consuming when I was reading something are not going to match exactly what someone else experiences from the same
Right.
story. Um I mean, The Shining is definitely better than Doctor Sleep, but I think that the book is really good and I think I like the movie as well, just not as much.
Well, if it's not on your list, we won't have to pin you down. So you get a mulligan on that.
All right.
All right. So I am now going to hit back from 1994. Okay. And this is one that I got to see on TV over the 4 nights that it happened. So I'm, of course, talking about The Stand. The only version, the only adaptation ever done of the book. There's not another one out there. I don't care what you
Right.
say. There's not another one.
This is it. This is the one.
It's the only one. I actually never watched the remake. I couldn't bring myself to it. I will probably break down one day and see it and see how it compares. But I didn't need to. I mean, the Stand is one of those um, just perfect ways to take that massive story, which I must have read half a dozen times because I read it a bunch when it first came out. My mom had gotten a Reader's Digest book club version of it, and then they released the uncut, and oh my God, that's just I read that so many times. Uh, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the story of a deadly biological strain, which they call Captain Trips, that wipes out most of the world. And the story follows the multiple uh, plot lines of the different characters that are being drawn to one of two places. So the good guys are being drawn to Colorado, and the bad guys are being drawn to Sin City, Las Vegas. There's so many great performances in this movie. One of which, of course, is got to be Gary Sinise in a very early role for him as Stu Redman. Molly Ringwald, the incomparable Ray Walston, uh, Rob Lowe, who barely says a word through the entire 4 different nights. And one of my favorites is Bill Fagerback, I think his name. And if you want to talk about something that goes into your own lexicon, Moon, that spells moon. And I do that to all the time. I actually tweeted it once off of um, Mick Garris, who directed it, of course, and many others. And I got a like for it, so I was like, I was super happy.
Nice.
But this is a great film. Um, the only drawback I have for this is the ending, and I guess it's one of those things that you see in your head and you're like, how is that ever going to come onto screen? And no matter what the CGI they may have had or whatever, of course it was 94, I don't think they ever could have done it real justice. So that one kind of makes me cringe just a little bit. But you get to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you get to see Sam Raimi, of course Stephen King himself. Um, just it's just a really great fun. Now you have to sit through all 4 of them, but the performances, the flip flops, it's just I love it, absolutely love it.
So I've read The Stand, and it's one of my favorite Stephen. I feel like I keep saying that. I don't have any Stephen King books that are not favorites. I'll just put that out there. But I haven't seen any of the adaptations of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that feels wrong now that you've talked about it. I didn't realize how star-studded that cast
Oh, it
was.
was. Yeah, yeah. And there's a whole bunch of other people I didn't even mention. Jamie Sheridan, who was on like I don't know, one of the FBI or NCIS shows. He's the walking dude. Ruby Dee, she plays Mother Abigail. I would tell you, just from my point of view, that I would watch the original first
Okay.
because from what I've heard of the remake, they jump around not just to the different plot lines, but also kind of in time. And again, I
Mm,
haven't watched it. That could be totally, but it's I love it. So yes, put it on your list right now.
will do. All right, writing it down.
All right. So before we go on to our penultimate choices, let's take a break and talk about you. You're so talented. You've won awards and you've done all of this stuff. So tell people about what your books are, where we can buy them, where we can watch your show. And we'll have all your socials at the end and all your connections too. But tell us everything about Hannah.
All right. Well, I to start kind of from the get-go of where things got interesting for me, I started writing when I was 19. Started writing seriously. My parents would tell you that I started writing when I was straight out the womb, but I
Yeah.
started writing seriously as a late teenager. My first book was published when I was 20,
Uh-huh.
and then got a taste for it and couldn't stop. So writing for me is like eating when I'm hungry or sleeping when I'm tired. It's just kind of constant. I love it. Like I said, I've mostly written in the horror genre, although recently I have dabbled in a couple other genres as well. So I'm excited to show you guys a little bit of what I've been working on that maybe skews from that a little bit. But the three books that I have out are all going to be in that kind of scary, spooky realm. Awake is a little bit cyberpunk as well. So it's got some sci-fi, some futuristic technology sprinkled in there. If that's your jam, would highly recommend checking that out. My books are available first and foremost on Amazon. You
Mhm.
can get e-readers, and you can also get paperback copies of each of them. If you're local to Oklahoma, locally owned stores are carrying my books right now as well. So you can usually grab paperbacks there. And I'm also co-hosting on a podcast with my dad, like we talked about. So my dad is Jay Hall from the Okie Bookcast, and
Josephina,
that's right.
Jebediah,
Yes, as you
Yosemite.
all know him. So he and I once a month co-host a section of the Okie Bookcast called Your Next Great Read. And basically we talk about books that we are currently reading or have read in the past little bit. We do a little backlist pick, and so we'll choose a recommendation from a couple years ago. So we have a good variety of books that we talk about. We bring on guests, we talk to other authors, we talk to just anyone in kind of the book community, bookish community, as we like to call it, bookstagrammers, book talkers,
Bookstagrammers. I like that.
all that fun stuff. So it's a really good time, and you walk away with hopefully lots of recommendations that you're interested in reading.
Yeah,
And so be sure to share links to all of that as well, so you guys can access
definitely.
those episodes.
And tell us about Sawtooth.
So Sawtooth is my first feature-length screenplay that I wrote just a handful of years ago. It was an idea that came to me when I was on a spooky hike that ended up having a rainstorm kind of crash it,
Oh,
and I got this crazy idea for a found footage horror film, and so I wrote it. Interesting thing about Sawtooth, it went on to win an award at the BEA Film and Media Festival, which was really awesome. I don't have a ton more information about that yet, but I hope to someday have some more exciting news regarding Sawtooth. So stay tuned for that, maybe.
I'm looking forward to it. It sounds so cool. Um, You're just so prolific. I mean, like your dad, better than your dad, actually. Your dad's only got the one book. You've already blown him out, and so just keep it up, girl. Keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we'll have all your socials, we'll have all the places that people can go and buy your books. And maybe you'll be sold out, because I have 19 listeners. I'm just,
Well, I mean, hey,
you
there's
know,
got to be 19 copies out there somewhere.
there you go. There you
You
go.
got
I'll
y'all
try to have
covered.
them by two. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to the part of the show. This is one of my favorite parts. It is the penultimate choices. I mean, really, who says penultimate besides me?
I
So,
love it.
if you're ready, give me your number two.
All right. So, I had a really hard time choosing my top 5/6 Stephen King adaptations. I had an almost impossible time choosing my top two, but this is what I'm going with. I'm doubling down, sticking with
All right.
it. So, I've saved my what I find to be the scariest two for last. So this is my second scariest, if you will. And that is from 2019, It Chapter 2. So the second adaptation from the novel It, which they split into two parts.
Okay. Okay.
Because I guess when you have an 1,100-page book, that's a lot to put into one movie. So they split it
Yes.
into two. So this is the second one from that book. It is an absolutely star-studded cast. We've got Bill Hader, Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy is one of my favorites, Bill Skarsgård. I love the Skarsgårds. Um,
I love just saying Skarsgård.
yeah, and it's spelled really cool too. So with the I don't know what those are called, but it looks really cool on all the posters, that's for sure. Um, so if you don't know the story of it, I'm telling it a little bit backwards because this is kind of the second part of the story. But essentially, there is this small town of Derry where this group of kids grew up. Some pretty traumatic things happened to them in their childhood, revolving around this clown named Pennywise. Clown, demon thing, right?
Right.
And he terrorizes this town once every, is it 27 years? I may be
That
botching that.
sounds about right.
It's something like that. And, he came when they were kids. Lots of crazy traumatic things happened. Now in chapter 2, he's back again and they are adults. So this is 27 years later. The clown demon Pennywise thing is back to cause more havoc. And the group of kids who are now adults have come back to try to fight him off and kind of end him for good. The acting in this movie is absolutely fantastic. The cinematography is amazing. The makeup is amazing. I mean, what they do to Bill Skarsgård to make him look like Pennywise
Mhm.
just absolutely blows my mind. It is suspenseful from start to finish. I mean, just know when you watch this movie for 2 hours straight, you are going to be on the edge of your seat. Um, I think it's so well done and the ending is so well done. And we've talked about, some of these films where the ending was like maybe not quite what we expected or they changed some things. Um, I thought the ending in this one was as loyal as possible and I thought it was really well executed even
Yes.
within that.
I'll agree.
So absolutely loved this adaptation.
Yeah. And like I tell Steve when we have our weekly calls, he
Right.
doesn't, some of the books don't end strong,
Yeah.
or they end in such a way where you're kind of going, huh? So for them to go kind of back to the norm, I mean to the novel, and bring that to life, which you couldn't do back in the 80s when they had it. I mean, first of all, it was on TV. So I
Right.
mean, um, it really did feel like they did that a lot of justice.
Hmm.
So I will agree with you. I actually, as much as you make a good case, I've actually had more of a leaning toward chapter one, and I don't know that I can put into words exactly what it is, except for the fact that the losers are just that. They're losers in so many ways. Everybody picks on a school. They're one of the parents beats them, one of them's alcoholic, all of this different stuff. Not the kids, the parents. But yet they're still able to band together and get through that trauma. The
Yeah.
scene where the young girl is in her bathroom and all of
Yeah,
that stuff, that shook me. I mean, that was so well done, and she was such a good actress.
totally.
So, but I can definitely see where the second one has its huge attraction because they've got all of this emotional baggage that they bring back, and they're like, crap, we beat it already. Why do we have to do it again? But together they do make just an amazing 4 hours, 4 hours plus. But
Yeah.
Tim Curry is always the best Pennywise, though.
There is a lot of argument for that. And he definitely was fantastic.
Yes.
I love that
Well, it's
adaptation as
different.
well. It's
Again, you're
different. Yeah, they're not
hard to
really
compare.
comparable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're you got TV and you've got R rated, hard R rating with amazing CGI and stuff. So yeah, I just have a personal for him. So, well, no, that is super pick. Your number two was chapter two. I like it.
There you go.
All right. Well, my penultimate choice comes from his very first adaptation, way back in 1976, directed by Brian De Palma. I'm, of course, talking about Carrie. Uh,
I love it. I was
ah,
hoping someone would talk about Carrie.
this is not my Stephen. I don't have a lot of these, but the girls have given me the Stephen King and he's bloody, and then I also have Carrie, who's also
Oh, amazing.
yeah, yeah. So this has been one of those books that, of course, I was 6 years old, so I didn't read it when it first came out. But my mom loves or loved, but still does probably all the Stephen King books. So when I was old enough, I got to read the book and then watch the movie. And I mean, the performances, Sissy Spacek as Carrie White was just phenomenal. You've got like Nancy Allen. You've got that guy who was in uh, Saturday Night Fever, Urban Cowboy, whatever his name was. Um, Amy Irving, and William Catt, who for me, I had already gotten to see him in Greatest American Hero. To see him in this, it threw me up. But it's a great, great, great movie, all about a young woman literally coming of age. She's 16 years old and has no one except maybe the gym teacher. And the movie opening, uh, obviously I was never a you know turning of age young woman at that time, but I felt like that had to be the absolute worst way you could have your first menstruation. I'm just like, oh my God,
It was horrifying.
horrifying. They were just so far. And then of course her mom, played by Piper Laurie, was just the perfect domineering, Bible thumping, just mom of just Satan. I don't I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
She took this girl who really needed love and understanding and locked her in a closet, and
Yeah.
so and then you got the four jerks who just, led by, well, PJ Souls has always got a special place in my heart. But that whole, prom scene at the end, I mean, yeah, at the end,
Iconic.
oh my God. And it's been redone, I mean, I don't know how many times now.
So many. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of them, but nothing holds a candle to the original, which just goes to show you there's no CGI. The cinematography is very 70s, and still it's a scarier movie than almost anything they put out today.
Yeah.
So yeah, my penultimate choice is always going to be Carrie from
Oh,
1976.
I love Carrie, and I'm with you on this one. I think the original adaptation is by far the best one. I've seen all of them, I think.
Oh,
and I've liked all of them,
Mhm.
but something about, that very first one and just the way that the characters really brought that story to life, that horrifying, emotionally taxing story, that I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal and it's so iconic. I mean, that prom scene, like, I mean, even different adaptations that have done almost the exact same thing, but in a little bit different light, it's just not quite the same as that very first time.
Yeah, it's hard it's really hard when practical effects have been done right to
Mhm.
come back later with a CGI and do it better.
Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, just the fact that it cost under $2 million to make and pulled in almost $34 million.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, you know, and for me, I think a part of it is Sissy Spacek. A large part of it is not just her performance, but her actual appearance. She almost looks like she has a blank slate on her face.
Yeah.
And all of these people could do things to make it better, but they all make it worse. Even
Yeah.
when they don't mean to. Tommy, for instance, Sue Snell, they try to help, but oof. And then the ending, the ending is still one of the best jump scares, of all times.
I
So,
absolutely agree.
all
I
right.
love Carrie. Great choice.
All right. Well, thanks. Well, I want to hear what is absolutely, positively your favorite Stephen King adaptation.
All right. So I had to go with It Chapter 1 for my very favorite.
Were you
I
biting your tongue?
I was the whole time you mentioned Chapter 1 when we were talking about Chapter 2. I was like, I'm gonna get to it.
You
Oh, I love this movie. I love this movie. It came out in 2017, so it was 2 years before the chapter 2 came out. Chapter 1 is just focused on the kids' story. So it's the first time that this group of kids, the losers, encounters Pennywise. And, we have one of the very opening scenes where Pennywise is seen for the first time and he comes out of the sewer drain and attacks Georgie, the little brother. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to let you fill in the gaps there. But oh my, that scene lives rent free in my head. I think
Yeah,
it's one of the most well done horror scenes in cinematic history.
I agree. I agree. That is
It's
definitely one that improved over the original.
Yeah, and and maybe that's CGI. Maybe I think the kid actor was fabulous as well, though.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of different factors that led to it being as effective as it was. I think Bill Skarsgård was amazing, um, but that is one of the scariest scenes I think that's ever been filmed. I mean, it was just so wildly effective, and the rest of the movie follows suit, right? So as this entity, I guess I'll stick with calling it that, this entity continually attacks and scares this group of kids that are trying to figure it out. It just the intensity just builds and builds and it just gets scarier and scarier. Once again, just absolutely amazing cast. Jaden Martell, Finn Wolfhard. I mean, just incredible cast. The makeup is still great. Once again, the costumes are great. It takes place 27 years before chapter 2, and so they had that time period kind of play into effect as well. So Derry looks a little bit different in chapter 1 than it does in chapter 2, and so I thought all of that was just extremely well done. I think it's scarier than chapter 2, and that's part of why I rated it higher than chapter 2, because I think when the entity is attacking the kids and
Yes.
it's playing off of those children and childlike fears, something about that is just even more unsettling than later when they come back as adults.
Right.
Um,
100% agree.
so I think that that makes it more frightening. I also think it had better jump scares. And I'm typically one to go, oh, jump scares are just kind of like the cheap thrill, whatever. But they were really effective in this
Mhm.
movie and they were used strategically. It didn't cheapen the scare factor at all. I think it enhanced it. And I think that that's kind of hard to do with jump scares. And
Right.
so I appreciated that. Also, the cultural impact that this film had.
Oh,
It was just absolutely astronomical, especially for a horror film. and kind of the cult following that it received, for better or for worse, right? We had,
Yeah,
clowns popping up places, and then they just all disappeared one day. I don't know that we ever got resolution to that,
I don't either. I
but
love too. You would see red balloons that people had dropped, and they were hanging out of the storm gutters.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you. You talked about scares. I also liked some of the really subtle, creepy things that they did. For example, when they're in the library and they're going back through the archives, and you go to the page where they find a picture of him, and then it moves, and you're like, "Oh, holy crap!" So wasn't expecting that. What's a jump scare that really sticks in your mind from there?
Oh gosh, I mean, there
Your
were
dad
so
hates when
many
I
good
do
ones.
this.
There were so many good ones. I When they are going through the pictures they're in, I don't remember the context exactly because it's not exactly how it happens in the book, but they're flipping through film of old pictures,
Uh-huh.
and he's getting closer and closer and
Oh
closer,
yeah.
and then, he's just right there. The sound design is part of what made that one so good.
Mhm.
And I think throughout, just the sound design was effective, not just with jump scares, but also with kind of those subtle moments as well. That moment in the library being another
Yeah.
great example. And when they're in the house later, and you've got like the creaking floorboards, and you've got door slamming, and there's too many to count, but that one where they're flipping through those photos,
Yeah. And it gets
um,
closer. Okay, remember that one.
that was such a well done moment. Gosh, yeah, such a good movie.
And look at you, just came up with one right away. See that, Jay? That's how it's done.
Oh, I was ready for you.
Well, I guess I got to bring it then. And I think I have. Um, I'm going to go just a few years later to 1979, and we're going to talk about Salem's Lot, Jerusalem's Lot, if you will.
Ah, great choice.
Directed by the incomparable Toby Hooper. Again, a TV adaptation over, I think it was 2 nights, might have been three. So this is a movie that I did watch. I was 9 years old watching this, okay? And I didn't get scared. I mean, with my mom, knowing so much about it and kind of, showing me at an early age, I knew that it was pretend, but it just enveloped me in this whole town and its history and oh, I mean, I love it. You've got the writer Ben Mears, who comes back to his quaint little hometown of Jerusalem's Lot, trying to write a book about the famous Marston house, the haunted house in every one of these places. Um, and little by little, you start to meet other people. So that's David Soul, from Starsky and Hutch, and then a guy comes into town who starts buying things and says he is a representative for the man who owns the Marston House. Was played by James Mason, incredible actor. And then you go in and you see all these little stories like he's so good at doing. You've got the Glick brothers, and you've got Gravedigger Mike and Bill Norton, and all of these different people who aren't even necessarily. I mean, later on the master comes and stuff, but just the evil that is permeating the town starts to affect them so much, and it's just incredible. That whole scene where Jeffrey Lewis, the Gravedigger Mike, um, goes, and I won't say who it is, but he is burying someone, and everybody leaves, and he gets called down into and opens the. I wouldn't even call that a jump scare because that was true terror. I mean, that was, oh, wow. And of course, you talk about rent free when Danny Glick and Ralphie, and you've got one of them, I will say one of them has died, and he comes back to see his brother, and he's scratching on the window. And he's like, let me in. Oh, wow. Yeah. it's still, again, you could CGI all you want to. You can't do that scene any better.
Yeah,
I just, I love it. I love it. So have you seen this one?
I have. I
Okay.
Oh, I love Salem's Lot. I love the store, all the I mean it follows a lot of different um stories and sub stories, but I love the adaptation.
Yes.
Genuinely very much. I thought it was just so well done.
It really, and I will give huge props to the remake because they did a very good job and a faithful adaptation. Again, Rob Lowe, I think it's Andre Brower plays the priest this time. Um, I really, really enjoyed it. And I was able to not compare it to the other one, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
enjoyed the 79 for what it was, for the nostalgia, for the creepiness factor, all that stuff. And I enjoyed the new one because of all the things they were able to do with it. Did you know that there is a sequel to the original 79 Salem's Lot?
I did not know that.
It is called A Return to Salem's Lot, and it stars Michael Moriarty.
Okay.
And it's different.
Okay.
Okay. I love Michael Moriarty. He's in the stuff. He was the district attorney on Law and Order for a long time. Anyway, it's out there. Find it one day if you're in a mood for a little quirkiness. But anyway, that's all I'm gonna say.
Interesting. Was it same director or
No, it was directed by the guy who oh touche, you got me there. Um God, he did It's Alive. I know I'm looking down, but it's because
you're
I'm
just deep in thought?
deep in thought is what
Yeah,
I am. I'm not going to IMDb to look this up and say that it was
of
Larry
course.
Cohen. Oh, that's right, it was Larry Cohen.
Ah, Larry
Just remember,
Cohen. Yeah, see, I knew it'd come to you.
that's it. So, and Larry has had Michael Moriarty in a lot of his movies. But anyway, it's like I said, it's different. Um, and it's worth watching. But really, aside from Michael Moriarty, I can't remember anybody who was in that movie. I found it, I think, on a VHS somewhere, and I digitized it to watch it. But at least look at the trailer. I think
Right.
Shout TV has been playing around, putting out a new remastered version of it.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, but I liked it. So, all right. Well, before we start to wrap up, is there anything else that is on the list that didn't make the list, that you want to talk about?
You know, what's funny is several of the ones that didn't quite make my list are the ones that made your list. Like
Oh, really?
The Mist was a massive runner up for me. Just because I absolutely love the different endings and the lore behind some of that and just the direction, and I think The Mist is really well done. Um the we talked a lot about you talked a lot about some of the earlier adaptations, talked about some of the later ones. Some of the earlier ones also would have been like right there in the running with me. So funny enough, we've pretty much covered
Oh,
uh everything that would have that was ever so slightly didn't quite make the cut for
yeah,
me.
yeah. Well, for me too, the stand, that opening sequence with Blue Oyster's Cult, Don't Fear the Reaper, where it plays and it goes to, still one of the best openings of any show ever.
So good.
I'm actually working on a list for an episode of best opening credits, and that is definitely on the list. I don't know if it'll make it to the five. It'll not. It'll be an honorable mention, but just the fact that there's no dialogue, no nothing. It's just going through the hallways and seeing the destruction that Captain Trips has already wrought on them. I thought was just fantastic.
So good.
1408 was actually um, on my long list. It was
Okay.
quickly taken out, but I liked it more for the actors and their performances than I did of it being an adaptation.
Mm.
And I also do love the fact that neither of us chose what is, and I don't use this word very often, but probably the best adaptation of any Stephen King story, and that's Shawshank Redemption,
Yeah.
you know. But being the
Shawshank
horror hounds
Redemption
that
is
we
so
are,
good.
yeah, you know,
That's the problem, right? I mean, there's so many,
exactly.
there are tons of phenomenal Stephen King adaptations, but we're the horror geeks. What are we
That's
gonna
it.
do?
That's it. So I'm super excited that I hear Edgar Wright is about ready to start filming a remake of the Running Man, but it's going
Yes.
to be very faithful to the book. And I don't know if you got to hear the episode that you and that me and your dad did, where we compared them. The book has, I mean, so many things topical now to
Yeah.
discuss. And if you don't make it, again, love Arnold, love that movie, love Richard Dawson. It was great. But to see that come off the screen, I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, before we close up, I want to give a special shout out to a podcast universe citizen, David Wright, who is the host of Apples and Oranges podcast, which is very neat. It's a show that compares the discographies of the Beatles and the Beach Boys by matching their albums and their songs against each other, like as a in a one versus one version. It's a great fun, especially if you like their music. And I've got a little ditty here to tell you a little bit more about it.
Hey, check it out. There's a brand new podcast. We will be matching albums against each other in a 1v1 format, discussing every single track and then giving our verdict on which album is better.
Pet Sounds versus Revolver. Sergeant Pepper versus Smile.
Wouldn't it be nice if most people knew how well the Beach Boys actually held up against the Fab Four?
Both bands inspired each other to keep pushing the boundaries of what was possible in pop music, here, there, and everywhere.
And what we got were some of the greatest albums of all time.
All Summer Long versus A Hard Day's Night. Rubber Soul versus the Beach Boys Today.
So let's come together for some fun, and help me, Rhonda, get this podcast off the ground. And we'll sure appreciate you being around on February 7th, wherever you find your podcast.
That's Apples and Oranges, February 7th.
So make sure to check them out and tell them that Fave 5 sent you. So thank you for just spending the time that I know that it must have taken, because this took me quite a while to make too. It was really tough figuring those out. So again, I'm super excited. I would love to have you back, especially knowing how this is working out. If there's something else you want to do, let me know. And if we're a voracious horror reader of different types, I've always been looking to do a favorite horror books just to read, because I've read a lot. And that would be fun, especially with the differences in our ages, to see what you read and what you like. But
Yeah.
anyway, this is an open invitation to come back.
I will absolutely be back. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to coming back.
Cool. And to all of you out there in the podcast universe, thank you so much for listening to Fave 5 from Fans. We hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I did. If you did, please leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app. And if you don't know how to do that, seriously, reach out to me. I have some instructions, because we really need the reviews. It's a free way that you can help us grow the show. And if you didn't like the show, maybe, figure out somebody in the office who's like always eating the food that you bring. And then when you go to get it, it's not there anymore. Those people are the worst. So tell them about the show, and maybe it'll ruin their afternoon. So who knows? And don't forget, we come out with new episodes every Friday. So be sure to subscribe and follow us, and look for us on YouTube where you're seeing this. Don't forget to also look for our other show, The Complete Disarray with Jamie Ray, where we take one topic and just go on and on and on about it, but in a good way. And remember, folks, it may not be the best. It may not be the most popular, but if it's your favorite, then it's good enough for us. Thanks so much for joining us. Hannah, take us out.
All right. Go find a Stephen King movie.
I like it. And let us know what your next great watch is.